Reagan remembered three things from childhood: that his father was a drunk, that his mother was a saint, and that his ability to make an audience laugh afforded an antidote to life's insecurities and embarrassments. When I was 11, I came home from the YMCA one cold, blustery winter's night, Reagan recalled decades later. My mother was gone on one of her sewing jobs, and I expected the house to be empty. Nell Reagan worked to supplement her husband's earnings. As I walked up the stairs, I nearly stumbled over a lump near the front door. It was Jack, lying in the snow, his arms outstretched, flat on his back. Reagan and his older brother Neil called his mother and father by their first names. I leaned over to see what was wrong and smelled whiskey. He had found his way home from a speakeasy and had just passed out right there. For a moment or two, I looked down at him and thought about continuing on into the house and going to bed as if he weren't there, but I couldn't do it. When I tried to wake him, he just snored, loud enough, I suspected, for the whole neighborhood to hear him. So I grabbed a piece of his overcoat, pulled it, and dragged him into the house. The boy watched his father during several years and drew inferences. Jack wasn't one of those alcoholics who went on a bender after he'd had a run of bad luck, or who drowned his sorrows in drink, Reagan said. No, it was prosperity that Jack couldn't stand. When everything was going perfectly, that's when he let go, especially if during a holiday or family get-together that gave him a reason to do it. At Christmas, there was always a threat hanging over our family. We knew holidays were the most likely time for Jack to jump off the wagon, so I was always torn between looking forward to Christmas and being afraid of its arrival. Jack Reagan's drinking made him an unreliable breadwinner, and the family bounced around Illinois during his younger son's first decade. Ronald Wilson Reagan was born in Tampico on February 6, 1911. The family moved to Chicago when he was 2, then to Galesburg, to Monmouth, and back to Tampico. The places passed like scenes outside a car window. Reagan remembered a noisy fire engine from Chicago that made him want to be a fireman. America entered World War I in April 1917 when the family was in Galesburg. The soldiers on the troop trains passing through seemed to a 6-year-old to embody adventure and heroism. The war ended in November 1918 with the family in Monmouth, where the celebrations almost overwhelmed the lad. The parades, the torches, the bands, the shoutings and drunks, and the burning of Kaiser Bill in effigy created in me an uneasy feeling of a world outside my own, he remembered. The family landed in Dixon when Reagan was 9. The town of 10,000 became his home until he left for college. Jack Reagan pulled himself together a bit, or perhaps Nell simply put a stop to the serial moves. But as his sons grew into teenagers, they encountered challenges of a different sort. Dixon had few Catholics and disliked most of those. The boys didn't practice their father's faith, but the malignant papism the town bullies saw in Jack Reagan was imputed to them, and they were forced to defend themselves, sometimes with fists. More insidious and less amenable to riposte was the scorn they endured on account of Jack's boozing. Nell Reagan explained her husband's weakness in terms intended to elicit the boy's sympathy and understanding. Nell tried so hard to make it clear he had a sickness that he couldn't help, and she constantly reminded us of how good he was to us when he wasn't drinking, Reagan recalled. Nell was Scots-English by ancestry to Jack's Irish, and she displayed the proverbial thriftiness of the Scot. Not that she had much choice, given her husband's uncertain earnings. She mended and remended Neil's clothes for passing down to Ronnie. She sent Neil to the butcher to cadge liver for a mythical family cat. She filled the stew pot with oatmeal and passed it off as a delicacy. I remember the first time she brought a plate of oatmeal meat to the table, Reagan recounted. There was a thick, round patty buried in gravy that I'd never seen before. I bit into it. It was moist and meaty, the most wonderful thing I'd ever eaten. Nell schooled her boys in religion by precept and especially by example, She spent every Sunday at the Disciples of Christ church and took the boys with her, to Sunday school at first and then to the regular services. She never thought ill of anyone so far as her sons could tell. While my father was a cynic and tended to suspect the worst of people, my mother was the opposite, Reagan remembered. She always expected to find the best in people and often did, even among the prisoners at our local jail, to whom she frequently brought hot meals. She preached and practiced the golden rule. My mother always taught us, treat thy neighbor as you would want your neighbor to treat you. She put others ahead of herself, and her sons foremost. While my father was filled with dreams of making something of himself, she had a drive to help my brother and me make something of ourselves. In one respect, Jack Reagan seemed entirely admirable to his sons. Their youth witnessed the revival of the Ku Klux Klan, which added Catholics, Jews, and immigrants to African Americans as targets of its venom. Jack forbade the boys to see The Birth of a Nation, the D.W. Griffith film that made heroes out of the white-robed vigilantes. In vain did Neil and Ronnie point out that all the other kids were seeing the picture, and that, anyway, the Klan in the movie was of a different time and place. The Klan's the Klan, and a sheet's a sheet, and any man who wears one over his head is a bum, Reagan recalled Jack saying. Reagan told another story that Jack had told him. On the road for work, Jack checked into a hotel where the proprietor assured him, "You'll like it here, Mr. Reagan. We don't permit a Jew in the place." Jack grabbed his suitcase and turned to leave. "I'm a Catholic," he declared. "If it's come to the point where you won't take Jews, then someday you won't take me either." Jack Reagan spent that cold night in his car.